Hey guys, today we are going to assemble an arrow. There are multiple ways to do this, but the most common way today is to use a fletching apparatus to put the feathers or the vanes on the arrow shafts. Now, before we do that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the choices that are to be considered when making an arrow or deciding what arrows to get. First of all, you need to know your draw length and your draw weight and the thickness of the bow, because you want the arrow tip to stick out just beyond the body of the bow so it doesn't hit the bow when you release. So arrow length is determined by your draw length from where you grip the string to where the palm of your hand sits. That's draw length. And the arrow is measured from the bottom of the nock to the bottom of the tip. Now bear in mind that if you use long inserts, the arrows become stiffer here, so please allow for a bit of extra length in order to make your arrow the correct flexibility or the correct spine. A word or two about the spine. These arrows here are 600 spine, and that is the static spine of the shaft at 28 inches. These ones are 29.5. And this is because I know that with this 35 pound bow that I'm using, that this would be the correct length. There are spine charts. Every arrow shaft manufacturer provides a spine chart where they tell you what, in terms of what bow you have, long bow, recurve or compound, and your draw weight and arrow length, what spine you should get with a certain tip weight. Now all of this is very personalized, very individual, so you will have to experiment a little bit with that when you make your first arrows. So I'll make a longer video on considerations upon what you should think about in terms of static and dynamic spine. Now you have arrow shafts, cut them to length or order them cut to length. This one is 29.5. Then we have inserts, this little thing that the arrow tip goes inside the arrow shaft. This is a long one, so this makes the tip of the arrow a bit stiffer. It sits all the way down to here, so it doesn't flex properly until here. Then we have a nock, collar that goes around here to make the tip of the arrow shaft more durable before you put in the insert. Then you have the nock, and the nock has this little notch on it, right? That is where your cock feather goes. Now this is important because I have 3 feathers with same color, because I think that looks good, and the notch helps me feel what orientation the arrow needs to have when I lock it on the bow. Then you have your tip that screws into the insert. Now you have to prepare these shafts by cleaning them with alcohol or any other degreasing type of chemical, and you need some glue. If you are a complete beginner, I would suggest using tape. This is spare part fletching tape, because this lets you undo quite easily what you have made if you made a mistake. The glue can be removed, but leaves marks on the shaft that are hard to get rid of. So for a beginner on carbon shafts, I would recommend the vane tape. So first thing you need to do is mount the nock. Now we have these writings on one side, and I like to have that away from the bow's body so it stays intact, so you can read the specifications on the arrow shaft. So the nock in, with the notch the same side as the text, so you can use that for later. Then we have to put it inside the fletching jig. Now the fletching jig has multiple selections. It has two, this one has 3, 4 or 6 feathers. That allows these clicks, right? So for this one I use 3 feathers. Then you have the clamp. This one is a helical one. There's straight ones and helical ones, and you have helical right and left. This determines the rotation of the arrow, making it stabilize quickly. So, once again, put the arrow shaft in with the cock feather one as the first one. Now please make sure that your clamp aligns. Now these screws here to make sure that it aligns so that the fletching sits in the middle of the shaft rather than out to one side. Please make sure of that before you start making an arrow. So start with one. If you had a different color for the knocking, for the cock feather, then start with that one. These ones are identical, so no need to see what to start with. Then you open the clamp just a little, and lay in the feather or lane if you use plastic lanes. And push it down. Then you have this little scale on one side, so you can start your fletching from the same spot every time. Now from this one I know that it starts at the exact end of the clamp, but it's not always so. When you do that, take your arrow, put it on a string and grab the string. So see how far out your fingers go, preferably with your tab or shooting glove, to see where to start and make a mark before you start off. Then you can see when you put the clamp down, before you glue it in, where to put the fletching on the clamp. Right? So put that in. Then you use either tape or glue. I use glue for these ones because these are not the first ones, clearly. And then I always start from the back of the vein rather than the front, because when I put it on, the glue runs backwards. If there is any excess glue, then it runs backwards and you have this little droplet between the fletching and the knock, and I don't want that. Doesn't look pretty. So glue, let it run to the tip and then start off. Don't use very much, just has to be wet. And yes, excess glue will just run down the shaft. Right. This is magnetic, so it stays here. And then push it down and wait a couple of seconds and it'll set and stay there. I'll show you in a minute. I just leave it there just for a couple of seconds just to make sure that it stays. Take off the clamp, and this one didn't, it wasn't all the way down. And so you have one fletching attached. Then put it back. You don't have to take it out, it's just for showing purposes. Put it back, rotate it one click, and put on the next feather. Now, I forgot to mention that you should check your fletching, your feathers, that the quill, the white part, is the same height all the way over. On all 3 fletchings, or you can go through the bunch before you start making your bunch of arrows, and you can just take a piece of fine grit sandpaper and just sand it while it sits in the clamp, because then you have the fletching sorted. Just ever so slightly and remove any grates or whatever, so that you have a good even surface to glue on. I think it goes without saying that if you have a rough surface, then you have more indiscrepancies when mounting your fletching. Push it down, let it set a bit. Before taking off the clip. While that sets, you can see that I did a whipping on this here, a bit of thread wrapped around and glued. This is not necessary if you shoot off a shelf, but if you shoot off the hand, it's actually quite nice because these feathers can be quite pointy, and if you miss or with where these might flip up, and to get some of that stuck in your hand is not very pleasant. So I use it when I shoot off the hand, and for this one I just did it because I think it looked great. Right. Next one. Turn it. Last fletching. And you'll get the hang of this in no time. The glue. Again, start from the bottom, not the tip of the vein, but the bottom. No. See, it's a pointy, like I told you, it's a pointy one. And they can enlarge themselves in your skin if you're not careful. But this is when shooting off the hand, not shooting off a shelf. So, glue once again, from the back. Into the jig, push it down and wait. That's really it for the fletching part. And see, I'll just tell you beforehand, when gluing in these inserts, these are long ones, and you start by gluing in the tip of the arrow shaft, and you have to push this in quite fast, because if it sets down here, then you have to reheat it with a heat gun and then push it in. It's not do or die. If you don't get it all the way in, then you can just reheat it with the heat gun for a couple of seconds with high heat, and then the glue will get fluid again. You can push it back in. So that is the fletching sorted. Knock is in, and this is the insert part. You will notice that the top has a few notches in it. This is break off points, so you can adjust the tip weight of your arrow. Now if you're not sure, I'll just pop that in. Before gluing, I'll just pop it in to show you, and mount the tip. Screw that in there and push it in. See, what we want now is a forward of center. Just about there. See, that's not the center of the arrow. The center of the arrow is here, but the balance point is here. That's forward of center, and the general perception of an ideal forward of center is 15 to 20% of the entire arrow length, and this is about 15%. This means that the arrow is tip heavy, so it will stabilize quickly and not flutter as much, or not flutter at all, hopefully, when being shot. Now if you think that this forward of center is too much, then simply break off a point and it will get lighter, and you can move this further this way. If you, on the other hand, think that this forward of center is not enough, you can simply replace the tip with a heavier one. But bear in mind that this increasing or decreasing the tip weight also affects how the arrow flies when shot. This is the dynamic spine, how the arrow behaves when shot, and this stiffness is the static spine. So if you add a little weight, you could shorten the shaft just a bit. this is something you'll learn eventually when making arrows, that what you need to shorten or lengthen or whatever. So by the time you made a couple of sets of these, you'll get the hang of that. So for gluing all this in, first off, I'll put the collar on, and I'll take out the tip, because if I need to just tap this into the table, I don't have this pointy end. Right, this is a snug fit, so when you do it, ever so slightly, and then push it in fast. That's, well, my experience, that's the best way. Glue just inside that hollow. Not a lot, just a couple of drops, because it's very thin and it runs through the shaft if you're not. There. Give it a couple of seconds and that insert is probably glued in. Then you can attach. That's it, it's already hardened up. And now we have a shooting arrow. Ready to go. So then the whipping part. I use high tension polyester for this, and what I do is I start here, just a couple of inches too long, wrap it around at the bottom, at the points of the arrow, fletching, and just whip it on ever so slightly, making it go just a couple of millimeters up on the feathers to just take off those points. They'll now be buried underneath. That's actually all. Then I need to restrain this, and I glue it, just one drop of glue. When I started all this, you can almost blow this all the way around the arrow shaft. Sharp knife for the little point. This one is already dry now, so just turn it a bit. Oops. There we have it. A slight whipping around the fletching. If you need to, this is just for show. That is the completion of an arrow, right? And next video will be on general aerodynamics, static spine versus dynamic spine, and effect of long feathers in terms of stability versus short feathers, light shafts, heavy shafts, light tip, heavy tip, all of that, and we'll get to that in the next video. So for now, get cracking on making some arrows. See ya.